we just have a couple of things we want to hit today. I mean, obviously, we want to make sure everyone on the phone knows why it's important to be a part of a board or commission in Washington State. We also are going to go through the website itself so that you can see precisely how to do an application, and then have an opportunity to kind of think about some of the ways to improve the quality of your application and make sure it's going to get as successful as it could be. And then we'll also have an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. So just in terms of housekeeping, for the time being, we're not going to mute everyone's line. But if we do happen to hear a lot of feedback off the phones, that's really difficult to figure out whose phone is doing that, so we will mute. And then we'll probably switch to questions being done via the chat window. And I think that's probably the way to handle it until we get to the question and answer section, that if you have a question in between, we'll take it over the chat window, and Marlene will point that out, and then we'll address it at that time. So please feel free to do that whenever you have a chance, whenever something comes up. So, so just looking at the chat window, we don't see anything yet. So I think we'll go ahead and kick right off, and let's sell boards and commissions to this group. Well, I think you're all here because you have a sense of why they're important. They're important for a lot of reasons. First of all, at the Latino Leadership Network, our mission is to bring Latinos into state service, bring Latinos into places of representation, because that's really how we get our foot in the door. Civic engagement is obviously a very important piece, and it's why we've seen a lot of positive legislation come out of the state legislature this past couple of years because of that engagement. We're always seeing positive developments on this front. And so this is just another way of getting your feet in the door and, having a say in how decisions are made at the governmental level. But even if that was everything that this was about, I mean, there is plenty more to talk about. And I think one of the biggest pieces to it is that you'll have the opportunity to serve on a board itself, which means you have a dynamic decision-making environment. You have to interface with other people. You have to hear evidence and come up with solutions, and you have to make recommendations and make rulings and allocate budget dollars. So these are all the kinds of things you'll actually be involved with that may or may not be what you do in your day-to-day positions. And if not, it's a great opportunity to meet new people and to have your face out there as, someone that has this decision-making capacity. And this is a really good entry point for all of that. But of course, ultimately there's another piece to this, which is your own personal and professional development. I think it looks pretty good on a resume to have that you were the chair of a board that had a lot of weight in a particular field. You also are going to meet a lot of people that are running agencies, that are deputy directors of agencies. They're all involved in a lot of these boards too. If you go, as we kind of look through the website, we're going to look at various board profiles, or at least one that we'll definitely show everyone. And you'll see, I mean, there are definitely community leaders that are involved in these boards. So you're going to be working in the same panel, having an equal vote with those people. And I think that's just a really good networking opportunity for you as an individual. But lastly, I mean, Marlene's going to talk about this, like, well, how does it actually matter in a tangible sense? Well, Marlene has a couple of stories to give you of why. So.
Yeah, I see joining a board and commission as very important, specifically or especially because we as Latinos have our own experiences, we have our own culture, and our voice in these boards and commissions matters because we have a unique perspective in the society and in Washington State. And I have a story about this woman named Consuelo. I actually can't remember her name, but I'm just going to use her name as that for today. I used to work at a nonprofit where we helped people sign up for health insurance, and this was during the Affordable Care Act. And Consuelo came up to me one day, and she was 7 months pregnant, and she didn't speak English, she didn't have citizenship status, and she was having pain. And she did not have health insurance, and she had actually never gone to see a doctor. And so what I did was just sit with clients and really just help them navigate through signing up for health insurance. And when I went to submit her application, there was a glitch in the system where the system wouldn't allow me to, it wouldn't approve her automatically because of the citizenship status. But in Washington State, you can be, if you are low income and qualify for medical care through AppleCare, through the Healthcare Authority, citizenship status doesn't matter if you are pregnant. So it should have gone through, but it didn't, which means that somebody forgot that this is the case, that pregnant women who qualified for the program, who didn't have citizenship status, should qualify. And I remember thinking, like, who missed this? How could this be missed? Like, they just, like, they weren't thinking about, like, you know, our community. Our community has households who have mixed citizenship statuses, and it can be very complicated. You know, our communities have unique needs in regards to many things: interpretation, translation, educational needs. And as a member of a board and commission, you know, you're setting up these policies and keeping the people who you serve in mind. In our experiences as Latinos, our cultural ties, language capabilities, you know, they all serve as an asset on these boards. And I just told that story because I wouldn't want someone who, like, I wouldn't want a board or commission that serves Latinos to miss those unique things that we have in our communities. I wouldn't want someone like Consuelo or people to be forgotten about, just like I experienced.
Now is sort of walk through what it takes. So let's start here, just so everyone's clear. We're going to start with Google. That's a good starting point. And we're going to start by typing in Washington governor. That's really all we need to do to start. And what we're going to come to is an official site up at the top, but we're going to skip that. We're going to look for the Governor Jay Inslee Washington State site, which happens to be www.governor.wa.gov. And you'll see here that we have the governor's homepage and a number of tabs across the top here. As we scroll across the top or move across the top, we'll see boards and commissions. And so what we would do then is click that. On the boards and commissions page, we're going to find all kinds of interesting information and then also links to even further information. And we're going to kind of walk through that. To start, we'll look to the left, and you'll see a tab that has the profiles of the boards and commissions, the upcoming employment opportunities, how to apply, how to recommend. Those are the real keys that we're going to walk through. If you just go to board and commission profiles, you're going to be probably surprised by the number that you'll see there, and it won't really give you the context you need. But this is where you could find the information on any particular board or commission. As we scroll down, we'll see that we have a new one. The LGBTQ Commission is coming up. It was just introduced this past year through the legislature, so they're filling that one as just an example. But there are, as you can see, just hundreds of them. So we're going to skip that for now because that doesn't give us much of a reference point. What we're going to look at now is upcoming employment opportunities. So, as you can see, it's been grouped into subject matter. And this is where you'll start to think about what you're particularly interested in. Now, everyone has an interest area, everyone has an area of expertise, but, and I should point out that some boards have certain requirements for who can serve on it, but not all of them, and there are plenty of at-large seats for people that just need to be people. And so for that, you don't have to follow your expertise into a particular board. You can just go to wherever you want. And if it has an at-large or a public seat, you know, it can be something that you're just sort of tangentially interested in, that you will then get the opportunity to learn much more about that particular subject area. Let's say both being parents ourselves, Marlene and I decide we're going to go look at Education tab. So we can click on the Education tab. And we can see, just by scrolling down, the first thing that comes up is the issue area is education, and it conveniently pulls you to that. And now we're going to look at a list of who's available. In this case, it just happens to be that the Early Learning Advisory Council has some availability, and you'll see that in this box, there are requirements. So you're going to have somebody as a local education agency representative. So if you're not part of that, you wouldn't qualify. And a Head Start representative may or may not be something you qualify for. But what you do have here is if you're a parent, that's the only strict requirement, that you have to be a parent to be on one of these seats. So you say, okay, I'm a parent, I'm interested in what the Early Learning Advisory Council might or might not offer for the work that they do and what it might mean for me. So then you can just go ahead and click on the Board or Commission profile link. And at this point, you'll get a little bit of a heads up on what the council does. You'll see some requirements here at the bottom. And then there are some other points on this that are very important for you to observe as you wade your way through. So we'll see the policy areas, education, that's obvious. We'll see the governor appointments. There are 13 of the governor appoints, and I'm speaking on behalf of the governor here, but there are other ways to get an appointment. We're just looking at it through the governor's office, because as you can see, there are 13 appointments here with 30 total positions. And you'll also see, well, here's what the statute says, if you ever are curious about where this was built from. Here are two lines that are really important for you to see. You have to disclose your finances publicly through the Public Disclosure Commission, and you have to be confirmed by a vote of the Senate. In this case, that's no to both, but you'll want to keep that in mind for any position that you're looking at. These should not be viewed as insurmountable steps to becoming a board or commission member. I can assure you there are plenty of people that do that. The public disclosure statement is fairly bland. It doesn't go into a lot of detail about your actual finances, but it is looking to make sure you don't have a conflict of interest. The Senate confirmation hearing. If you get one, the Senate doesn't always get to the confirmations for all the boards, but if you get one, you go in front of a subcommittee and they ask you a few questions. They just want to kind of know a little bit about yourself. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but if you do it, you will have done it. And now you could say that you've been in front of the Washington Senate and you had a confirmation hearing and they approved you and you're now on a board. That's a big deal. I think that's really important. And, you know, one of the things that us at the Latino Leadership Network would want to do is be a resource for you. So when something like that comes up and that's what you think the impediment is, well, come have a conversation with us, and I'd be happy to talk to you about what it means to actually do that. So moving on, you can also see a little bit about what the compensation might be. Now, there are a few boards that are full-time positions. Those are going to be treated like any other position that you're applying for. You're going to have to go through all of the steps there, multiple interviews. But most of these are volunteer, but that doesn't mean it's all volunteer. This particular board has a stipend, some reimbursements per diems. If you have to meet elsewhere, you're going to have your lodging covered. So that's something else you'll see there. And then lastly, it talks to the term length. So this is a 2-year term. If you think that's too short, know that often the governor will reappoint people. I think the sort of frame of reference is that 10 years is probably when they want to start looking for new blood. So if you're reaching that 10-year point, or you're gone through a couple of terms and you're starting to get to that point, they're going to probably start looking somewhere else just to make sure that, you know, there's no legacy there that can never be broken. But for the most part, 2 years shouldn't be an impediment either. If that's too short for you, you can do a good job and you can hope to get reappointed. Then the last thing we'll do is go to the actual website. Why are we going to the website? Well, you're probably curious about how often the board meets, let's say. So we might go to here. And here's the website for the board. It's on Marlene's agency's website, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, who's hosting this board. And you'll see that it has 6 regular meetings a year. So that's your total commitment, really, in terms of time. It's 6 meetings a year. I mean, that's not a lot. And there are some that only meet 4 a year. And then the next thing you might want to do is open up an agenda. So you have an agenda from the last meeting, and you can see kind of what it looks like. So they started at 9:30 and they ended at 3 that day, the lunch break. And here are some of the items that they actually walked through that day. And then later on in the agenda, you might see something like, here's what the purpose of this board is, and this is what we're really trying to do. And then you see something like, you know, we're committed to open dialogue to bring up timely issues and diverse priorities, delivering and including state and local policies and programs. And so these are the kind of things that you'll get a sense of what the board's really trying to do. And even if that's sort of an overall general look, you also would have the opportunity to reach out to the board staff or perhaps the board members themselves to maybe reach out and say, hey, what does this board actually do? How does everyone get along? What would my role be? And right here we can see a list of the current members. So they're all right there, and you might recognize some of their names too. So that's what we see in terms of locating a board that you might be interested in and figuring out as much as you can about it. And yeah, that's what I would say on that front. And now let's talk about how you'd actually apply. Not too difficult, but I did want to walk everyone through it.
Oh, I just want to reiterate that when Alejandro first started going over the very first page on the boards and commission opportunities, I've looked at these and, I have an interest in education and health, but some of the boards I looked at were really, like, the experience they wanted was very specific, and I felt intimidated, and I was like, oh, I'm not a health expert, so I actually didn't end up applying. But Ale brings up a great point that, you can serve as a representative of the community, which is great, and a lot of these do have that option. So I just want to reiterate that. You can serve as a general public member if you have an interest in any of these. Like you see here, I am pointing out to the general public opportunities through the Medical Quality Assurance Commission, which is a really great opportunity. All right. Thank you, Joy.
Okay, thank you. All right, so and maybe it's a lag on the system, just so we know, but where I'm going next is going to be the application piece to the boards and commissions page. That's where you're going to say apply to serve here. It's off to the left, and right here you'll see this tab or this sort of button that says apply to a board or commission, and that's what we're going to click.
And I was just thinking for everybody that's on the phone or joining us online, we can definitely recreate all of this into a PowerPoint so we can have it up as well that guides you step by step on each page and where to apply. So that way we have a recording, but also sort of like a guidebook for people. So we will work on that, and we'll have that available for the people who are experiencing issues with the technology.
Right. And so on this page, you're going to basically see the online application. And like a lot of employment applications, you'll notice that you're going to have to duplicate some fields that are already going to be on something like a resume. But that's going to be required because it has to be put in for the system itself. So pay careful attention to what is a required field. You're going to see these asterisks that are going to be the required fields, like your first name, your last name, and then the next tab below is going to be choosing which board or commission you want to be considered. So that's where you can pull up that tab, and you'll see the entire list right there. And that's where you can scroll down and pick the board that you've seen an opening for and you're interested in applying. And then if you couldn't find it, then you do have the opportunity to use the space below to type a name. And they're going to ask if you're a current member of the board. Most likely you're going to be no, but if you are, make sure you indicate that. Then they're going to ask for your contact info, so you have to put in your address and your email and your primary phone number. And also, in this case, you're going to have to put in your congressional and legislative districts, because that's going to be a required field as well.
And if you don't know what that is, you can find it at myvote.wa.gov, and you can also register to vote there. That's
true. But you also have, if you are registered to vote, but you don't go, you have this link right here as well to figure out what those are. Those are pretty quick to find, though. They don't keep that too buried at all. And then the big piece here is, why do you want to serve on this board or commission? This space. It's a required field. It's actually, if you don't want to do your own cover letter, you definitely don't have to, because if you put it here and write that carefully, then the cover letter would be duplicative and not necessary. So this is really your space to sell yourself, like a cover letter would be. But this is another important piece. This space is used for if the position you are specifically applying for is filled elsewhere, they use this information to be able to contact you as more similar positions come up. That's a really important piece. So what they really want to see is your interest area and your enthusiasm for the service in that area. And this is your opportunity to sell them on that. I think I would recommend you put it into a Word document initially, so that way you can do all the editing and have somebody help you review it so it reads well and it shows that enthusiasm, it shows your interest areas, and then, we'll add it back into the website when you're ready to actually file an application. But this is something we're going to talk about a little bit later, which is just, general resume tips for how to be a successful candidate. But this is a very important piece, and I just would not recommend leaving this sparse. And this is your chance to sell yourself, and I think this is a really important opportunity to identify all of your interest areas and why you'd be a good fit. Then you kind of scroll through. You have a few other questions that are going to talk about some very important pieces that I think are really quickly answerable. Which is what's your availability? Do you have a potential conflict of interest? And those are important. They need to be filled in. That will come up later. Then you're going to have the opportunity to fill in your work history, but I will say that if you have it on your resume, you can just say "see attached" in all of this. That's not a required field, and the reviewer will just reference your resume. The only other time where you have to have a required field here is this reference. So these two references are required fields, but you can also have a separate reference list too, and then have a C attached on the third and fourth references. Same with previous employment or experience and membership in organizations or government or boards and commissions. Those will all be on your resume. And if you have all those memberships, they should be on your resume. Then your birth date's the required information. Your race information is not. And so that's really just some final pieces. And then down here at the bottom is where you're going to want to upload your file. I would recommend that you put your resume in as a PDF, save that as a PDF, and then upload it through this file. Triple check that it's uploaded. And we won't be able to show you that here, but it should pop up as a file name right here, right before you hit submit. And then when you've gotten through all of that, then that's your chance to submit, and the rest of the application will go through. Now, if something goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. We just make contact with the boards and commissions staff. We say, look, I sent something in. I really can't assure you that it was complete. I felt like something went wrong. Can I follow up with you separately? The answer, of course, will be yes. They're going to be excited to hear from you, and they're going to want to work through that application process with you. So they'll have staff in place to do that. I want to point out one other thing that I think we're going to hope to do at the Latino Leadership Network, and that's this piece right here. This is not really for the applicant themselves. This is what we're going to look at long term, which is submitting a recommendation as the Latino Leadership Network for people that we think would be well suited to be in these roles. And so that's what we're going to use is this recommend an applicant feature when that time comes. But even if Latino Leadership Network doesn't go in that direction, this is a really helpful tool for your name to kind of get noticed as being, hey, this person is definitely interested, and we have other people that want to bring your attention, bring the boards and commission staff to know you. So even if the Latino Leadership Network doesn't, if you have somebody that's on a board somewhere else or is somehow known to the governor's office or even isn't known, but they know your work, you could ask them to recommend you as an applicant for a particular board. And I think that's a really important feature here on this website. So I just want to point that out. The Latino Leadership Network, we'll look into that a little bit. And then also, as I say, if you know someone that wants to recommend you, this is the spot to do it.
Yeah, and I would say that even though we haven't really discussed recommending applicants, we definitely advocate for applicants to join boards and commissions. So if you're in this webinar right now and you're listening to this and you have some interest, definitely follow up with us, and we'll see what we can do to help you with this application process as best as we can.
That's right. Yeah, and I'll be available to do that. I know others have said that they're going to be willing as well, because ultimately our mission is the same. We want to get people on these boards and commissions, and we want to, do professional development. And so what better way to do that by doing anything from walking through this application process to doing recommendations or getting those lined up to looking at resumes. So one thing I want to point out, this is not me trying to boast, but I didn't want to reveal anyone else's personal information, so I wanted to talk a little bit about resume building and making sure you have a good resume. Just a couple of key factors. I think it's really, really incumbent on whoever is going to be submitting a resume to make sure you've had an independent set of eyes take a look. Have you made any grammatical errors? Does it look organized? Are your descriptions consistent? Are they overly broad? Is there too much in there or not enough in there? So I think that's a really important piece, and that's something else I'd be willing to help people with as well. My resume is not the best resume on the planet, but I thought I would just show you that, typically what we see for successful resumes would be, your contact info at the top, and then, organizing it with reverse chronological order. And you can either do your professional experience or education first. I think I've seen a lot of good resumes that have education first, that lays out there, what the person's done from that background, and then start walking through your professional experience chronologically. A lot of times people are trying to put in very specific items like the day that they started service or something along those lines. I don't think that's as important for the typical resume reviewer. I think just getting a general sense of where you were and when is really what they want to know, and walking through it. And then I think most people know that the way to really do this is to bullet point a few of the highlights of your position, and not just to focus on the duties that you have. I mean, you really want to be able to stand out and say, this is what, what my expertise is, and you can see it honed in through this pathway that you can walk through. If you go back in time from today on backward, you can see, in my case, it was tax work, and you can see maybe where my progression was in the tax field as you go through. I think it's also important to watch how you start each bullet point too, right? So make sure you have the proper tense. If you're in the position right now, keep it in present tense if you can, and start with an action verb. And then if you're walking back in time, move it into past tense and start with past tense action verbs. And don't be overly repetitive with those action verbs, and try and use a thesaurus and walk through all the various action verbs that you can do, and ultimately try and make it so it's easy to read. And is it seamless from one to the next, and it's not overly. You don't want to have these big paragraphs, right? So making sure things are brief but informative. So I think those are all some good tips. And as I said, we'll be happy to help you. There are many people that were going to be on this call that are going to review this that have way better resumes than I do, and that's great. And, just feel free to supply those as they are. But go ahead, Marley.
We also have HR staff on our LLN board that can also review resumes, and I'm totally volunteering them to do so. But, we want to serve as a resource to employees. So if you've looked at your resume and you want somebody else to look at it, feel free to reach out to us, and we can work with you to do that. That's
right. And there are plenty of resources online, too, that'll walk you through what a good resume looks like, and some resume tips and all of that as well. Yeah. And there's some contact information. Obviously, we have the Latino Leadership Network's Gmail account. We also have the director of the boards and commissions email account for questions to him.
We're also on social media. We're really active on there, and we typically share everything from our newsletter on social media sites. So if you aren't currently following us, definitely check us out. And on each site, you just put Washington State Latino Leadership Network, and we should come up. On Instagram, it's a little tricky. You have to put, our name is WA_LLN. And if you're looking at the screen, our email address is on there. If you have any questions about this webinar, obtaining these materials, or following up with questions on how to join a board and commission, we will follow up with you. Please reach back out to us if you have any questions or want to join a board and commission.
Yeah, that'd be great. I hope to hear from everybody, and I hope to see lots of applications come our way. I know the government.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.